Hello, folks. This is just a notice to let you know that we will be taking a 2-week break over the Christmas, and our next episode should be on the 5th of January. Hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a prosperous New Year. You're listening to the Adventure Party for the 3rd week of December 2024. This week, the party skulks in the shadows and climb in a second-story window as we search for the origin of the rogue. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
I'm Warlord Scarr, and I would never skulk in the shadows.
I'm Savage Mick, and skulking is something I do at the weekend, like caulking.
And today, we're back to talk about the class origins of D&D. There's no Karl Marx here. This is about
Okay.
This is about redistributing the wealth in a somewhat more direct fashion.
Yeah, towards the coffers of those who did the redistribute. It's not really redistributed. Hold on. Let me see if I can frame this in the dialectic. No, it's still thievery. We're talking about rogues and thieves.
Yeah.
It's the Origin series. We're in a series now, the Origin series, and thankfully it's not the origin of us, because let's face it, we try to be family friendly. That's not going to happen. But no, the light-fingered, the quick-witted, and the cunning class.
So, do we want to start with literary origins, or are we going to focus in on mechanical D&D-like origins?
The first time Grog said to himself, instead of clubbing Og, why don't I just sneak into his cave when he's out hunting mammoths? And thus the rogue was born. Stealing is a very human thing. It's been covered in everything. Like Prometheus stole from the gods. History's first rogue? I'll let the audience decide.
Well, Gary Gygax started a wrestling promotion called the IFW.
What?
The International Federation of Wargamers. Wait a minute. This isn't a wrestling promotion. This is a wargaming club. And he started that in 1967. And he was putting together, lost his job, started cobbling shoes in his basement, realized that sucked, and then published Chainmail. And as we've talked about before, one of the fallouts for Chainmail is he had the Castle and Crusade Society's fanzine, the Domesday Book. And reportedly, in that Domesday Book, people would submit rules to expand kind of Chainmail, and as it was becoming kind of Dungeons and Dragons. And one of the suggestions that kind of came in seems to have been the rogue, as a counterpoint to the fighting man and magic user.
Yeah, I think cleric had snuck in some point as well, because this was... we'll get to that in the origins of cleric.
Coming soon.
Almost definitely.
From gods near you. The man in the toga, the cleric. Everyone else is wearing pants, but sometimes you just gotta get the tabard and mace on. Okay, enough of the promos. Yeah, it feels very... The rogue, we can, just as soon as you say the word, you picture it. That little kind of hooded, with the point and a dagger somewhere, and probably tiptoeing, and probably through someone's window or door that isn't their own. It's just, it's a weird mix of beggar, mugger, second story man, cat burglar that seems to has been condensed out of, I think, a lot of different places, and a lot of literary influences, literary and other media influences, because Gygax and most role players are magpies for this stuff. That finds itself in a stew. I suppose Italian opera probably has something to do with this as well. The domino mask, that kind of stuff. We're heading for the Hamburglar here. Let's just admit that.
Well, this is one of the things, and we brought this up during the fighter episode, is that because they had very few classes to cover essentially all fantasy archetypes. An awful lot would get condensed into the legend of each class. And you would get stuff like the confidence man, the second story thief, the pickpocketer, the brutal mugger. These would all sort of fall under the guise of the rogue or thief or what have you. But there's a sort of back element to that. The rogue was trying to fill certain fancy archetypes, and people will usually point to three examples. Early Conan, where he was just as likely to be sneaking into a wizard's house and trying very stealthily to steal his ill-gotten demonic jewels, and the twin duo of pulp, sword and sorcery, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, a very iconic duo.
The original Shadowrunners.
Yeah. And the thing about them is that, they definitely have that element of being, a skulking thief, doing it for money, never sleeping in the same bed twice, living by their wits. But they're also not exactly clean connections to the archetype itself. Because we got Conan is, even in his early days, was still, a warrior by trade and would pick up a sword where he needed to. Similarly, Fafhrud's like a Viking.
Yeah, big old strapping.
Yeah, so while a stealthy fellow, is he also 6 foot tall and will break a person in half.
Fafhrd is 7 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
2.1 meters.
Damn.
The Grey Mouser steals all of this. I mean, he's the one you kind of picture when you're picturing that class rogue. But
yeah, he's the one who, I think, came up with the classic hooded.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like taking a jester's outfit and just dripping in black ink
and being physically quite small and not terribly. Looking for that backstab advantage because you're not able to square up. Whereas I guess Fafhrd is like, well, we'll go quiet until we have to go loud, and then we're going really loud.
But the other thing about the Grey Mouser is that he's also a wizard. Like, he's also a magic user of not terrible skill. Like, it might not be his primary thing anymore. He may have given up the wizarding life after his soul got threatened a few times, but he is still, he can still turn a spell and, has insight into the horrible things that Fafhrd and Grey Mouser keep running into. So, in like terms of DD, these two would probably be multi-classes. And if you want to actually go to the iconics of the rogue class, damn, what's his actual name? But basically, there's a character by Mr. Vance, Mr. Jack Vance, from his Dying Earth series, where we get the Vancian casting from. And I'm just trying to remember who this fellow's name is.
The Grey Mouser, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser also are arguably an early appearance of, or the first appearance of a Skaven analog. That then there's basically a bunch of giant rats with crazy technology that they fight in one of their adventures. And Jez Goodwin, sculptor of the Skaven, had fan art of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser published in some fanzines. So he was a fan. That may be the first glimmerings of the loathsome Ratmen to tie in some more origins there.
Absolutely. The name I'm looking for is Kugel the Clever, which you've probably never heard of. And again, I had to look it up online, which should tell you how, despite being incredibly influential on D&D, the Dying Earth series has not penetrated it any further into the modern fantasy zeitgeist.
Well, I mean, if Jeff Bezos isn't going to throw a bunch of money at the TV series first, then why even bother? It would be an interesting TV series. It'd be sort of like, what was it? What was that TV? This is aging me desperately. In fact, this is aging my references desperately. It was a gunslinger TV show. I think it was Bill from Kill Bill, who wandered the
Kung Fu.
Yes.
Sorry. No, we're saving that for Origins the Monk. That's for Origins the Monk.
Okay, all right. Well, we previews abound here. Hey, this Origins idea might have some legs and flying fists. But yeah, like a Dying Earth TV series could be kind of cool.
Although they would have to rewrite Mr. Kugel the Clever because it being a 60s picaresque fantasy movie, Mr. Kugel is not a nice person, and it would go very Game of Thrones very quickly if we were to use the original. But regardless, I think the archetype of the rogue, as I say, is drawing from a broad set of things, from Robin Hood down to Fafhrd, Greymouser, Kugel the Clever, and is trying to do so much with all of them. And so Gygax, based on that original idea from the Domesday book, tried doing something very, at the time, mechanically unique, as they gave him skills. A set of abilities based on percentile dice, which were not used anywhere else in D&D at the time, and giving them chances to achieve various feats of thievery.
The thrifty game designer, noticing he had a whole set of dice, he wasn't doing anything in the probability sets, said, "Aha, an opportunity."
Yeah, that's to be fair. I believe like there's a theory that like the fact that weapons do different types of damage is also due to them investing heavily in polyhedral dice. I believe that was one of the first errata was to add in the different damage codes to weapons, just to and hit dice for classes, so that.
So before we go any further, just to paper in some more origins or possible origins of the sorts of things we see rogues getting up to in role-playing games, I'd take you ever so slightly outside of the realm of genre fantasy fiction. And I don't think this discussion goes forward without a mention of A.J. Raffles, the Gentleman Thief, character created in 1898, and he's the quintessential heist thief. He scopes it out, plans it meticulously, and then pulls it off. A bit like a magic trick or one of the denouements of a Sherlock Holmes story, which is not by accident, as he was created by E.W. Hornung, who was Horung, who was the brother-in-law of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So Raffles is a contemporaneous character. Some just like comes out after Holmes, but operating on the other side of that coin. So and he had kind of a Watson. He had a guy called Harry Bunny Manders, who former schoolmate. Yeah, Raffles and Bunny and Saul, and it's all a bit Jeeves and Wooster.
Yeah.
But without being written as a pastiche. So Raffles is the expert thief, master of disguise. He's been adopted quite a lot. David Niven played him. John Barrymore played him. This is going way back, and a bit like Zorro, falls off in popularity after the 20s. And we do a lot of Dracula and Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that instead. But I've read a bunch of them ages ago, or maybe I listened to audiobooks. Short stories, very much the style of Holmes stories, and well worth a read. They're good inspiration for different sort of heists and foils. And really, if you want to understand where the rogue comes from, I think this is Raffles sits in there quite nicely. Again, underappreciated in the modern era, but very very influential.
Yeah, that's just the thing. Yeah, Gygax is pulling from an awful lot of sources like that. 50, 60 years of various influential but not necessarily top shelf literature and stuff like that. Or well, he wasn't French enough to read the Arsène Lupin novels, but that sort of thing. The 1890s stuff that leads into the 1920s stuff, and that leads into the 50s stuff. The cycles of literature, as we might call them, and yeah, that's sort of where he's pulling from. But in doing so, here's one of the things: is like I don't think the initial draft of thief skills. I'm pretty sure there's like 6 or 7 of them. I don't think any of them had con rube as one of their options.
I don't think Gygax foresaw many rubes in his dungeons. Unless they're Rube Goldberg machines. I think he favored doors and traps.
Yeah,
Nicely
he
done.
presumed. I think he mostly presumed the rubes with people sitting across the table from him.
Yeah.
He certainly wrote the DMG as if he did.
Yeah, yes, CRP was
As he pulled out a set of clogs to work on while listening to Rob Kunster. Damn.
Is that
clogs.
true? He was a basement cobbler. Amazing.
According to Wikipedia, I have no special insight.
None of the Gygax dynasty have risen up in wrath to sue over the facts, so we'll have to assume it stands.
I can see the desperation trying to get out of that business, you know? When you're mending shoes in your basement, you're like, I gotta do something.
Imagine being so desperate for career change, you go and invent a new hobby.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, and certainly very few people involved were not encouraged to embellish the whole thing. But here's the thing: like the initial set of thieves skills did something, and again, a lot of this is being backfilled in by the OSR new thinkers from like the mid aughts to mid 2010s have sort of laid a lot of blame on the introduction of the rogue as sort of invalidating what they consider, free play of, Conan's a rogue, so my character with my fighter man, who is meant to be my own version of Conan, well, he can do sneaky stuff too. I'll just describe myself doing sneaky stuff, then the GM and I will work out, what are the conditions there for sneakiness? Is there light? Is there shadow? Am I wearing the right shoes? And this was considered the way that this rogue-like things would have been done before they brought out this supplement of thief skills. And all of a sudden, the thief has a special ability that says move silently, so clearly only the thief can move silently. And this is sort of the origin of both what we in modern parlance would call niche protection, where a given archetype is the one that is good at its thing, but also sort of some people claim the death of more imaginative playing, where if I do the thing that makes sense for the result I want, it should happen, as opposed to all of a sudden now we need to multi-class into rogue and roll dice at the problem, whereas before I could just describe myself being roguelike and thus be a rogue. It's one of those things that it's an interesting thought experiment, but like at the same time we have to lay at the grounds of the rogue is that the rogue invented the idea that different characters were going to be good at things, and without that basis to work on, we don't get the more in-depth RPGs later on, such as RuneQuest, which was basically saying, well, now we need everyone to have a D100 list of skills. And we don't, do we get Cthulhu without the precedent of the rogue? How much game design comes from the fact of, us experimenting by giving this special feature to one of the archetypes?
I mean, I think the skill guy, the smart hero, the kind of trickster hero, the thief, the gentleman thief or the more violent thief, I think that was roiling under. It's a natural fit for D&D's game of smash and grab. I think the Hobbit can't be underestimated there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because what it comes down to is the wizard goes, no, you and your fighters, we need another person because we're at an unlucky number. I'm bringing you a burglar. And he proceeds to hire a middle class member of or upper class member of the landed gentry, who's too polite to say no.
Don't worry, he's got natural thieviness due to his genetics. Don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, he's genetically inclined to be a thief. Don't worry, he's got the skills. And like the most reluctant of the gentleman thieves, Bilbo Baggins, who Americans often struggle to understand how he made a living. But there you go. He's landed gentry. What? He doesn't do anything. He's landed gentry. He sits around. He goes out. He buys nice food for himself. He eats the nice food. It's a sweet life. He reads a book occasionally. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't need a job. He's got money. And my favorite explanation is where is he getting the money from? It's royalties from the invention of the game of golf. Because it's always his great uncle Bull Roarer invented the game of golf by knocking the head off a orc and landing it in a hole, winning the battle, and inventing the game of golf in the same move.
Yeah, I remember that being coming up. Oh, yeah, but that is one of the things, is as well as the archetype of being the sneaky one and being the skilled one, another important archetype that the rogue unlocked for D&D was being the underdog, being the small bean who hides in a fight and waits for the loud noises to stop. It may be a bit more controversial, but particularly in the modern day where everyone is expected to pull their weight in a fight. But at the time, it was probably important for people to have a relative excuse to be the non-combat person, or at least to hang back and chuck darts beside the wizard who'd use the spell for the day.
Yeah, and I mean, this is like, we're looking at 15 years after The Lord of the Rings, and like a good amount of time. Like The Hobbit has had time to percolate into fantasy, and then you have the later editions like The Elf and the Dwarf, because The Lord of the Rings shadow looms long over fantasy, and it was gonna affect the games that were kind of playing in that space.
Yeah.
Its shadow was going to fall upon them eventually. And the idea of the thief, the guy who sneaks ahead and opens the doors and gets away, pervasive, I think, at that point.
Well, all the dungeon doors are locked and trapped, and don't even get started on the chests. And have you tapped the floor lately? Because it could be lava. Yeah, the fighters are struggling with that. Magic in the Vancian system, there's only so many spells you can knock out a day to take care of problems. You need a guy. Oh, sure, you've got the cleric for healing, but you need a guy or a gal who can Batman their way through this in a sense, because much like Fighting Man, they are raw human potential for the most part. There's no, apart from frisson of magic, so that makes its way into the mix. The rogue is understood to be working at the edge of human ability in terms of deftness, attentiveness, dexterity, and acrobatic, not to mention sheer intellect. So it's forced into the hobby, I guess, by the fact that dungeons are becoming more complicated than 5 rooms and a boom. There's mechanisms that are showing up. There's poisons and pressure plates and all. I mean, anyone who's taken a run of the Tomb of Horrors, Thief's a really useful thing to have in there, as long as they don't mind going on fire every so often or changing gender. Yeah, it's so yeah. The as you say, he did the game, the shadow of fantasy fiction and the shape of the game itself is pushing the thief into its shape. We start with the raw ingredients from Fafhrd, Cohn, Raffles, Bilbo, and to get it into the shape of a player character, it's sort of put through that Play-Doh spaghetti fire that is the evolving dungeon at that time. Now, what do they look like today? Can we trace any lines? Have we lost anything along the way? More damage.
Yeah, they're definitely the idea of the rogue as someone who is used for skills and then hides in a corner until the orcs are dead. That's definitely gone away. We've now very much gotten into the action rogue thing with the guy with a knife in each hand, who's skirting around the battlefield, skirmishing and getting them the old kidneyectomy from behind.
It's gone back to the mugger. The kind of cut purse. Cut purse, is that the right phrase? Yeah. Alleyway skulker that is kind of mixed in there in the visuals. Because let's face it, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser were not hanging around in the most salubrious of neighborhoods.
No.
And then there's the whole rat thing. So, actually, speaking of the rat thing, the evolution of the thief, I think, gets a real big bump with the eponymous game by Looking Glass Studios, or no, who made Thief?
The Dark Project.
Sorry, Thief the Dark Project. Yes,
we're talking about the all or nothing days of the mid-90s, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and the gadget stuff again, the sort of the Batman side of it, grappling hooks and moss arrows and bullseye lanterns. All of these are the tools of the thief. You're expected to master this stuff and have a. Man, moving silently must be tough with what amounts to a contractor's work belt strewn with picks and slide whistles and all sorts of other doodads.
Or we could just say you pay 20 gold for a thieves' tools, and we won't worry about the details. Which, fair enough. But yeah, that is one of the things. Is like during the 90s, the thief very much picked up the archetype of being the user of things, and as well as all your knife fighting and sneaky archery, you really picked up the idea of using different things. And this is where I think the use magic device skill came in to in third ed to basically let the thief activate things as if he was a wizard or the like. And so you had a backup scroll user or wand user if you really wanted.
Did that come from Tasselhoff Barefoot often waving around stuff and accidentally activating it? Magic items in.
I would think that is very probable. I don't think the first and second ed had the same test of magic item rules that third ed would end up with, but I do think I suspect that what are their names?
Weiss and Hickman.
Weiss and Hickman, yes, and I believe they had a fellow at TSR who was the editor. I can't remember his name, but he would have been a TSR head at the time. Also, so I believe that between the three of them is where we get sort of the vibes of Dragonlance. And but yes, we can't discount, much like we can't discount Drizzt for the modern ranger, we can't discount the Dragonlance crew for modern interpretations of classes, and definitely TAS would be an important feature in thing. And I believe,
Which of the kids was the thief in the D&D cartoon? Haley?
The ginger one.
Bobby it was the redhead, right?
Yeah, she had a cloak of invisibility or something like that. So, but this, I suppose, the tools and the items and the backstabbing come to really corral the thief identity at that sort of AD&D onwards point, or second at least. Sheila, Irish name, hence the red hair. Although I have to say, I can't remember her having much of a personality outside of maybe sticking up for Bobby and Uni.
I remember her being the complaining one. I remember being the one who whined.
No. Eric's the complaining one. Come on.
Sorry, but she was the different. I don't know. It's been a while.
She urged caution, perhaps.
Yeah,
as would befit someone who likes to go unnoticed. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain to come up with good ways to animate invisible in a 80s cartoon.
You know what the interesting one is? The other female character was also a thief.
The acrobat, yes.
She was a thief acrobat. She, like, you could say, it's a monk, but that was a thief acrobat back in the time.
Yeah.
Other type of thief.
Yeah, I believe the very first variant class, or one of the very early. Like, I think that around the same time that they were making the paladin into a variant fighter, that I think the thief acrobat kind of squeezed in there somewhere. Probably another. By that point, it probably would have been Dragon Magazine, or maybe Alarms and Excursion, which I think was the successor for the Domesday book. The early zines of the D&D fantasy setup were you need to go John Peterson's Playing at the World book to get a breakdown of those. But regardless, the thief acrobat became the other version archetype where like half your thieving skills in order to increase all your movement based skills, because people were very, very sick of learning how the damage rules, the falling damage rules worked in early editions.
When you're breaking them out, it's always a good sign. So we've kind of charted a lot of that kind of course for the thief. Can we perhaps fling ourselves into the future? What happens if everybody in the game is a thief? Or, a cyberpunk / runner / whatever you're having yourself. If you're not playing angry men in big armor in future games, you're as like as not playing some sort of cyberpunk style sci-fi game where basically everyone's job is stealing stuff. They just go about it in different ways. Does the thief kind of envelop all of that in a certain sense, and so lose identity in the same way?
I think even within the realms of Shadowrun and thing, there are still classes there. They abide by different names, despite the fact that everyone is trying to break in. You've probably only got a few specialists who are actually getting good at it. You have your hackers, the bypassers of the modern locks computers. You've got your con men who are explicitly there to interact with the human element, and then you still have your fighting man, or be it the street samurai or the
good for a backstab.
the various cyborged up individuals, or possibly even channeling mystic arts to beat people up, but they still are there to apply boot to face.
Yeah.
And like you'll note that you'll have a wizard, be it a direct magic user or be it something that in the cyber world that will also afflict their foes. The hacker then becomes, instead of merely the bypasser of locks, the befuddler of foes and the breaker of their spirits.
Yeah, the hacker really does sort of hold on to most of the rogue / thief identity. Not a frontline fighter, as concerned with getting through obstacles as they are with defeating opponents, in this case ice. Yeah, it's just I suppose it dilutes a little bit. It's much easier to kind of nail the. Should we talk about actual rogue net hack? Does that really matter? Those are actually more like adventure. Those are just one-man adventuring parties with all the misfortune that entails. They just happen to be called rogue, and obviously we can talk about the rogue like. Probably missing a few. We kind of touched very briefly on Robin Hood.
You dip into some, like, it represents an archetype in fiction as well. I mean, from there's always a folk hero who's a bit of a dodgy character, who is sort of the gentleman thief and avenger of the common man. You look all across fiction, you'll find someone like that. In every culture, you'll find a character like that. Be it the direct trickster, be it the partly divine character. Like, is Odysseus a rogue or is he a straight fighter?
Yeah, you could certainly argue he has his fighter moments and he has his roguey moments, definitely.
The Renaissance man.
That's the thing. Is like a lot of these older heroes don't have the same definite archetypes that we have, and they have a bit Doc Savage-y in their ways, where because each one is usually the hero of their home city, they tend to get given all positive qualities. They're smart, they're quick, they're strong, they're tough. They have a sense of justice, etc., etc. Whereas outside of stories in the role playing space, being able to play to archetype is a lot more useful because it gives each person a definite role in the group, and thus in an RPG, being able to specialize yourself further is very useful.
Do you think Doc Savage is a rogue?
Doc Savage is literally the best at everything. He's like I've read the first half of the first Doc Savage story is basically explaining how he has assembled a crack team of the second best people in America at everything, and so that he has he has a chorus to tell him how awesome he is because he's the first best at everything.
Also, audibly thinks they can hear him thinking. I know that sound, Doc. What are you thinking?
Yeah, because it was the 20s and psychic stuff was in vogue at the time.
Maybe he doesn't fit too neatly to, but I mean, there were people like the Phantom and the Shadow that the Shadow perhaps more so in terms of the look. But if you kind of squint, you can kind of fit the more acrobatic, stealth-based fighting.
Who knows? Who knows what evils lurk in the hearts of men? Because the Shadow is explicitly psychic.
True.
And then you've got the Phantom. Now, is the Phantom a rogue?
I mean, I would give you a good chance of him being a druid, honestly.
Yeah. Actually, now that I think of it, Domino Mask and tight lycra aside,
the OG Phantom is explicitly a pirate hunter.
That's right. Yeah,
that's his thing.
The anti-rogue.
Yeah, he basically pair of 45s and
a dog. Shadow.
No. Like initially, he got a wolf called Devil.
Wolf
and a horse, called Hero. And there's a bunch of different. He's a line of basically outsiders there to do stuff, and he later becomes this kind of outsider that defends Africa. Later on, when as the Phantom continues as a comic strip,
they were kind of reinventing them to make sense as well. The world moved real fast, and some of those heroes kind of adapted, and some got left behind.
The hero who stalks, the beast calling brother, the ghost who walks.
He's 100% a druid. We will be circling back to this in the Origin Druid episode. Gentle Ben and others.
I do want to point out that one of the big innovations in the modern types, apart from more rogue types like Marvel's Loki, is I think something that people will think of a lot when talking about rogues, even if his adventures are a bit higher scale. I do think they are very roguey adventures.
Heist's a heist.
Yeah, just because they're in multiple times and multiple universes doesn't mean they're not heists. But I think the big innovation for modern gaming in the rogue is the Blades in the Dark style thing of the dedicated rogue RPG, where rather than the thing where, okay, we're in the middle of the dungeon, rogue, you go on ahead, trigger all the traps because you can't roll a D100 to save your life. And after the orcs eat you, will comes charging in and take them by surprise. That mismatch between what the party's doing and what the sort of the far end of niche protection is niche super specialization. So at the point we're playing a different game from the rest of the party. Whereas now we've sort of got the idea of a heist is a party thing. It's a group thing. You saw those Ocean's 11 movies. So clearly we have to get the team together to pull off this mission. And thus the innovation is the idea of an entire RPG would just set up to take advantage of all the different archetypes, whether it be muscle rogue, suave rogue, dexterous rogue, hacky rogue, and use the best parts of all the different rogue archetypes to create, a more focused rogue centric thing. I think that's one of the big things in the modern day is the alternatives to just being the rogue of the party. It's to say the rogue experience is universal because there's so many different types of rogues.
Yeah, it circles back to Fafhrd and Grey Mouser. Both thieves, both very, very different to the skill sets, both engaged in the same lifestyle. So yeah, I think it comes full circle.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have gotten through into that until we'd gone through the Cyberpunk or Shadowrun phase of they are trying to map the D&D archetypes to a more heist-based setting and it having mixed results.
I've got two more characters to ask you about. Is Zorro a rogue?
Oof, I'd say yes, but I understand the argument that he's a pure fighter, but
Zorro is the original. He's the OG. I'm smarter than my opponents, and I'm a criminal with a secret identity. He is the OG guy who is always smarter than his opponents.
Yeah.
Uses the rapier and the whip.
Yeah, these are very roguey things, and I would say I would come down on him being a rogue.
Is Batman a rogue?
I knew we were going here.
I've seen enough arguments that Batman's a wizard that I don't think I can have this conversation.
You're a wizard, Batman.
Should he ever decide to cross that line, he'd be the best damn rogue going. Very much, Batman's been sort of recast as the Doc Savage of our times. He's a great businessman, a great philanthropist, a great lover of women, a great unicyclist, a great shark repeller. And that's just in the 60s. Is Batman even relevant for this conversation? He wears a mask, so yeah, he climbs things.
So because these are all the lithe, dexterous, acrobatic hero who are big from the 20s to the 40s to the 50s to the 60s. This would be influential in how people think. They want a guy like that. They want a slightly different play experience. And I think that plays into the evolution of the rogue. This guy should be good at fighting as well. Batman's good at fighting. Zorro's good at fighting. And I think that gets into it. Is Indiana Jones a rogue?
Like, explicitly steals stuff. Yeah, I think he is. Like, that's his whole shtick.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the development of the class is influenced by, this is a very popular archetype of hero. I know my brother has played effectively Zorro several times. I played a rogue and effectively built Zorro several times.
Count of Monte Cristo, I think, sits in fairly well in this frame as well.
And I think, one of the elements there is the idea that the hero is smarter and deceives his opponents a lot. And that's a key part of the rogue that often doesn't quite come across. That the rogue is also the master of disguise. The rogue is the person who knows a trick that the other guy doesn't. Is the Lone Ranger a rogue?
We could be here for a while.
I'm talking, that's the hero we're looking at, the smart guy.
I feel like animal companions kind of
disqualify
you. So, and that chucks out so many others.
Also being called a ranger?
Well, it didn't help. We completely failed to cover the Lone Ranger, didn't we, in the last one?
Yeah, everyone's complaining with Robin Hood, but the Rangers also.
Yeah, that's fair. Out goes Drizzt, not a rogue, because that cat. Out goes the Phantom. Out goes Batman, because of Robin.
Not Ace the Bat Hound?
Sure, or Batmite. Take your pick. Far too many animal companions. But obviously having a sidekick doesn't preclude being a rogue. We go back to Raffles again. Right, so that's pretty much I think we've covered about as much ground as we could cover. I'm sure all of you out there who are listening will be more than happy to drop into Discord and just point out some of the holes in our filigree of tapestried history. Wow, that kind of sort of worked. But we've patched together bits and pieces of it, purloined from pop culture, the zeitgeists of the late 1800s into the 1920s, and of course the as we get closer and closer to the modern day, what if everyone is rogue?
So that's, I think, one of the things we've really hit on is that
bring back the whip. Catwoman demands it. Bring back the whip as a viable weapon choice.
Absolutely, yeah. Join us on our Discord. I hope you've enjoyed this second entry. I think second, yeah.
This is third or fourth at this point.
Third or fourth, depending on when it releases.
Yeah, exactly. The magic of editing. In the Origin series, which I don't know, it's keeping us entertained. Let us know what you think. And I think we should put a poll up on the Discord for. We'll put up 3 potentials and see what the audience wants us to cover next. Which now means that I have to figure out how polls work on Discord. But do stay tuned. Who wants to steal the outro?
I'll do it. Right of Conquest. So, if you've been affected by the things discussed today, please complain us on our Discord. But for now, this party is away into the night. Thanks for listening to the Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there or record a message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server. Links in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.